Well, it's another Buffalo Sabres video. And you know what? It's kind of funny how we're making so many of these. But I said it before, I'll say it again, there's just so many news and discussion topics we have with this team that it's tough to avoid it, man. It really is. So today we're talking about Eric Staal because we had ourselves what was a segment done on the Fourth Period's Twitter account. So this is David Pagnotta's own Twitter page. He also is the Fourth Period guy who has insider information with the NHL, and he does his own radio show on SiriusXM NHL. Well, he posted a video yesterday with none other than Vancouver's Irfan Gaffar talking about some trade rumors with the Buffalo Sabres. And this one is about Eric Staal, and the new scoop on the block picked up by Pagnotta that says that Staal himself would be okay with getting traded to a cup contending team. Now, it's in a position where even though he does have a 10-team modified no-trade list, he's in a spot where if there are teams asking and if there's a move to be made, he would not be opposed to spending the end of this season with another team competing in the playoffs. Now, Eric Staal right now, 36 years old. He's got a few months left on that contract, making $3.25 AAV. And he's a guy who is only at 9 points in 24 games played. Now, the Sabres are sucking this season, so that's okay. Last season, though, 47 points, 19 goals. The season before that, 52 points, 20 goals. And in 2018, he had 40 goals and 76 points. He's been a really consistent point producer up until this year. And on the Fourth Period video, they discussed 3 different teams wherein Eric Staal could potentially be traded to. They are the Florida Panthers, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the St. Louis Blues. Now, aside from this, we also had an insider trading segment on TSN just a little bit later, talking about how apparently the Edmonton Oilers could be thrown into that bag as well, because they are apparently eyeing Eric Staal. Take a look at this. This is the comment from Pierre LeBrun. Obviously, the pending UFAs in Buffalo are the most likely to be traded, as they are the easiest to move at this time of the year. Eric Staal would be among those players. In the past several years, Staal, through his camp, has told the Minnesota Wild he would rather not move. Well, of course, he's not in Minnesota anymore. He was dealt sort of against his will to the Sabres in the offseason, which we did actually cover, by the way, in a video back when the trade happened. LeBrun has the same information Pagnotta has, where it does seem like Staal would accept a trade to a contending team. LeBrun says to keep an eye on the Edmonton Oilers. A trade with Edmonton would have to be a dollar in, dollar out kind of move because they are right at the cap and they do have LTIR space already pushed up. But they are looking to make an upgrade on their third-line center spot. And I'm told that Eric Staal is a name that has been mentioned internally by the Oilers brass. So there you have it. It's not just Chicago, Florida, or St. Louis we can talk about. Let's also talk about Edmonton as well. And so I guess we're just going to do that, okay? Let's do it. Let's talk about each of these teams and the idea of an Eric Staal trade, starting off with the Florida Panthers. Now, it's mentioned in the video on Twitter, but the Panthers don't have the best center depth behind those 2 guys at the top. Barkov is Barkov, and we all know how good Barkov is. We have Alexander Wenberg, who is on the second line, and you have Eetu Luostarinen on the third line, which isn't really ideal, I would think. So if you're in a position where you are with the Florida Panthers with your really good record, you're one of the legit teams in your division at the moment, which is something that a lot of people weren't really expecting, it really wouldn't be all too ludicrous to go out there and acquire a guy who could play on your third line as a literal 40-point guy last year and 20-goal player the previous years before that in Eric Staal. Because he honestly could be a very good presence to help mentor out some of those other young guys you have on the squad. You have Grigory Denisenko in that system. You also have Luostarinen as well and Owen Tippett, so you have some good young talent. Eric Staal could be a mentor for these guys. You never know. What will it cost for the Panthers? Well, I don't know. They're actually in a better spot than a lot of these other teams because they do have $3.2 million in cap space at the moment, which is actually really good. So who knows if it's not all too much of a big price for the Buffalo Sabres that would be needed to acquire this guy over there in Florida. Next up, Chicago. Now, this is mentioned specifically because of how Chicago has broken past all expectations they had. They lost Jonathan Taves. They lost Kirby Dach. They had these brand new rookies and Pia Sutar and Philip Kurashev and Kevin Lankinen coming in to replace Corey Crawford as the new guys in town, and all of a sudden, each of them are legit contenders for the Calder. Chicago is one of the better teams in that Central Division, and even though it is so, they still have a capacity to improve their center depth if they wanted to go out there and acquire an Eric Staal to really help this team in a mentorship role push into the playoffs. Who knows, in a best-case scenario, you have Jonathan Toews and Kirby Dach come back for the season. That could be an automatic powerhouse. Patrick Kane playing some of the best hockey he's ever played in his career, along with the hot rookies. Add on an Eric Staal who might be able to get his mojo back playing with somebody like Alex DeBrincat or whatever, and you still have those guys too, in Toews or Dach, that might be able to impact your squad too. The Chicago Blackhawks are a lot more legit than I thought they would be, admittedly speaking, so I eat my words on all the stuff that I said about Chicago back in the offseason. Next up, though, talking about St. Louis. This is a team that, similar to the Chicago Blackhawks, are, as mentioned in the video on Twitter, completely banged up. No Robert Thomas, no Tyler Bozak. This is a team that wants to be competitive and wants to go far in the playoffs once again. They want to make a statement after losing out on Alex Pietrangelo and taking on the contract of Torrey Krug, along with that Justin Falk contract that looked so bad last year when he wasn't really all too great. So, for the Blues, since they're in that window of opportunity now, do you say, hey, we'll go over to Buffalo, we'll ask them for another center, and we'll try to fleece them again like we did with Ryan O'Reilly? Oh man, that kind of idea has all the makings of a repeat situation with Eric Staal, although Eric Staal is a lot older than Ryan O'Reilly was back when he was traded from Buffalo to St. Louis. But the context, man, it's kind of funny how it's similar. But finally, the last team I wanted to talk about was the Edmonton Oilers, because Pierre LeBrun brought it up on an article as well. This is the most interesting one here, because obviously, Canadian team, you have the quarantine going on, all the other teams you spoke about were American, and Eric Staal is in a position where, if you play him in this Canadian division, behind Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, or you play him on the first power play with those guys or whatever, I would not be surprised if he really does start getting that goal-scoring, point-producing touch back. Who knows if it's only gone because he's playing in Buffalo, but you really want to reignite somebody? Oh, just play him with McDavid and Draisaitl. That sounds great, doesn't it? It's just the fact that you have to be money in, money out because the Oilers are in a spot where they're really tied up against the cap. That in itself is another problem that arises in this kind of discussion here. They have some other guys that are in that ballpark AAV-wise. Obviously, James Neal's an expensive one, 5.75 AAV. You have Alex Chason making 2.1 on an expiring deal this year. You have defensemen like Tyson Barrie making 3.7. You have Chris Russell making 4. Not to mention that Zach Kassian, who is an LTIR contract, making 3.2. It would be incredible if a Zach Kassian is going back the other way, maybe with like a first or a second or whatever, just so the Sabres get compensation for taking on that contract of his, because he'd be going back to Buffalo. That's just one name I'm kind of pulling out of the hat here in terms of what could be a return. But for Edmonton, I'm kind of fearing for my life as a Canucks fan, thinking about the idea of Eric Staal playing on what is already a pretty offensively stacked Oilers team. And the fact that this is the team that is mentioned to actually apparently have internal interest in Eric Staal compared to the other teams who are just brought up as ideas, suggestions for a potential trade, it certainly changes the entire dynamic of the conversation, because it doesn't really seem like there have been any other teams that have been confirmed, according to media members, to actually want this guy. So, for Edmonton to be the first one out there that's apparently in that conversation, it really does kind of get the gears rolling, and I'm thinking about what could be a return, and how exactly the Oilers are going to have to do, because you're going to have to wait a while before this guy plays. We saw that with Pierre-Luc Dubois. It took him like 2 weeks, and a little bit, I think, to actually get suited up with the Jets full-time. So, it also evolves, I guess, into another question as to whether or not we'll see any more interdivisional or inter-border international, my goodness, international, that's the word. Any more international trades, because the one that we did see with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Patrick Laine was a big hassle for Winnipeg, so I don't know if there are going to be any other Canadian teams that would be willing to suffer through that fate of waiting. But I do think it's really interesting, so talk to me in the comments what you thought about these ideas over here. Eric Staal, he's okay with the idea of a trade, so let's talk about Chicago, Florida, St. Louis, and Edmonton. What could the Sabres get back? What should they get back? What should they expect to get back? Tell me in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. Trolls99. And bye.